What can you sow in February? Actually, loads of options now. It's such a great time of the year to be sowing. We put out a video in December entitled What to Sow in December, Realistic Expectations Over Winter. And in that video, we basically explain why we don't sow anything in December or January. We prefer to wait until the first week of February. A lot happens on the first week of February. Daylight starts to increase now, and by mid-February we're really noticing now the extra daylight. And if we sow in the first week of February, by the time we get to mid-February, we're going to have little seedlings now that are going to start to respond to the extra daylight hours. So what can we sow? Well, we can start with onions. So we'll sow these first week of February, and we're going to be hoping to transplant these into the ground mid-March for a harvest in June. This is a variety called Bedfordshire Champion, and we've just had to nip down and buy this because we thought we had onion seeds, but we used them all last year. Last year we grew a variety called Isla Craig, I think that's how you pronounce it, and that was a great onion. We multi-sow onions, 3s or 4s, clumps of 3 or 4, so that they sort of grow into, well, they're slightly smaller than if you were to grow them individually, but overall the yield I think is slightly more if you grow them in clumps, but you can grow them individually too. So onions is a great one for February. Turnips again, you can sow in the first week of February, and they're really fast growers. We're going to be transplanting these out mid-March. We bought these from a company called Real Seeds here in the UK, and actually most of the seeds we buy are from Real Seeds. We never have any problems with this company. This is a variety called Petrovsky, I think that's how you pronounce it, and from a February sowing, transplant March, and we're going to be looking to harvest these in mid-April. So really early cropping vegetable. Nobody else in my house likes turnips, so I end up eating them all on my own. Fine by me. Slice them up, fry them with a bit of butter. Absolutely amazing. Next up we have radish that you can continuously sow really every couple of weeks. Radish are tiny, so you don't really need a dedicated bed for radish. You can pop them in wherever you've got space really. I know a lot of people, when they're sowing carrots, because carrots are quite difficult to see when you first sow them, you can line next to the carrots a line of radishes, and that helps you mark out where your carrots are. I know a lot of people do that. This is a variety called Sparkler 3, and this was just bought from Wilco's. You can have little round radishes or some long ones, and we do actually have, I think, a mystery mix from Real Seeds as well that we'll probably sow as well. So radish is a great one. If you sow these in February, start of February, you can transplant them out mid-March, and again you could be harvesting these as early as April. Amazing. Cabbage and cauliflower, sow at the same time, transplant at the same time, harvest pretty much at the same time. This is called Greyhound. It's a summer cabbage. Again, first week of February for cabbage, and we're going to be looking to transplant these out mid-April and harvest in June or July. Same for the cauliflower. This is a variety called All the Year Round, and if you time it right, you can be harvesting cauliflowers most of the year. They're so tricky to grow them. Got to be honest, we don't master it 12 months of the year. The greyhounds, though, are very reliable cabbage. Next up, Aqua Dulce Claudia broad beans. You can sow these over winter too, and we already have done. We sowed these in November, and they're looking like pretty strong plants now in the greenhouse. The challenge is keeping them alive over winter. It's been so cold here in the UK. We've had frost, we've had 2 bouts of snow, sub-zero temperatures. So these are extremely hardy, but because ours are still in pots, we do take them home, put them on the windowsill and wait for the frost to subside. And I've just checked and they're looking pretty good at the moment. So we'll be looking to transplant these from a November sowing sometime in February for an early crop. You can also sow these in February, and you'll probably end up getting a crop, say, a month later than if you sowed in November. Aquadulce Claudia broad beans. Okay, beetroot. Beetroot is a crop that we have all year round from various sowings. So the first sowing of the year is made now, first week of February. This is a variety called Boltardi. And from what I understand, other varieties of beetroots may run to seed if you sow this time of the year. Boltardi prevents that, apparently. So this is the one we go for. If we sow now, we're going to be looking to transplant these out mid-April, and we're going to be looking to harvest these mid-May. So we'll sow these in groups of 3 or 4. Now, the thing with beetroots is, it took us a couple of years to realize this, but one beetroot seed can make multiple seedlings. So if you're multi-sowing these as 3s or 4s, you may end up getting up to 10 seedlings. You're going to have to thin them out, else you're going to end up with 10, well, you won't end up with 10 beetroots because they won't grow into the actual roots. You'll just get leaves without any beetroots, which is what was happening to us. So make sure you thin them out. You want 3 or 4, and when they get to golf ball size, you can twist one out and let the remaining 2 or 3 grow on, and when they get a little bit bigger, so on and so on. We've actually still got beetroots in the ground from last April sowing, and they started out as a clump of 3 or 4 that we slowly twisted individual ones out. We're left with the singles left now, and you know they're getting pretty big, and they can stay in the ground as long as we don't get a serious sustained frost. But beetroots are a great one to sow, again, first week of February. What's up next? Lettuce. So we saved our own seed from lettuce this year. It's actually really easy. It's the first time we've tried it. We let one plant of each variety grow to seed, and then at the end of summer they turned into flowers, and one plant makes so much seed. We have 3 varieties here. These envelopes, by the way, we printed off from Real Seeds website. They're just plain envelopes that you cut out yourself and you glue them. We have Lola Rossa. We have a variety called Ice Queen, and another variety called Winter Density. And when we put out the December video on what or what not to sow in December, we did cover all the lettuces that we had sown in September. So from a September sowing, we're still harvesting lettuce now, and we'll be doing that until April time. But if we sow these now in February, these will be ready to harvest in May. So if you time it right with lettuce, you could be harvesting lettuce all throughout the year, which is what we try to do. Okay, next up is Brussels sprouts. This is a variety called Long Island. They haven't been very good for us this year, and I'm wondering whether to switch to an F1 variety. We don't grow any F1s here, and we never have, but I'm not totally against the idea. But from what I understand, Brussels haven't been maintained very well over the last few generations. So a lot of people now grow F1s to give you those really tight, big Brussels that you're supposed to get. Ours did blow a little bit this year, and they've been a bit smaller than in previous years, so may go for F1 next time. But we can sow these now in February. You can also sow these later. I know a lot of people sow these into April or May time. They are a winter crop, so we'll be harvesting these in Christmas Day and over winter, as we still are now. They're still in the ground from last year's sowing. Okay, what's next? Well, ones that need a little bit of heat now. Tomatoes. And we grow 2 different varieties. One's a vining variety called Stupis, again from Real Seeds. And this is a bush variety called Later. I think you pronounce it Later, L-A-T-A-H, which is kind of ironic because this is an early variety called Later. But it crops quite early, a whole month before the vining tomatoes. This, I believe, is from the Czech Republic, the later one, and it's been bred to withstand colder temperatures than your average vine tomato, and you get an earlier crop. We saved our seed from tomatoes last year. Just scoop them out and let the seeds dry, pop them into a little envelope, and hopefully these are going to come up. But we'll sow these at the end of the month. We won't be sowing these at the start of this month. They do need a little bit of heat, which we don't have. We don't have heat mats or anything like that. We just rely on the natural heat. You know, a lot of these seeds, if not all the seeds I've mentioned today, to kickstart them, you could just take them home. If you sow them into cell trays, you could take them home, leave them on the windowsill or even on the floor somewhere, just until they start to germinate. They don't need light to germinate, just a bit of warmth. But as soon as they germinate, you would then need to bring them back into a greenhouse so they get that light. But tomatoes need the warmth and the light too. So with tomatoes, you may want to wait until March. There's no danger of doing that. I don't know if you get a much earlier crop by sowing in January or February than if you were to sow in March or April. I think they do catch up, tomatoes. Cucumbers, on the other hand, we can't be sowing cucumbers now in February. We need to wait till around about April. They really do need the warmth to germinate. So along with tomatoes, we have got peppers and chilies. The pepper we have is, again, from Wheel Seeds, and that's called Sweet Chocolate. We bought this last year and they did germinate, but due to our own fault, they ended up dying. We won't be making the same mistake this year, hopefully. So we'll have some nice peppers this year. This is a variety of chili called Onivec. And we bought the seeds about 5 years ago. And every year since then, we've saved our own seeds. We've still got chilies in the polytunnel from last February's sowing. Clearly not chili season at the moment, far too cold, but there's still one or two red ones hanging on for dear life. And I'm just wondering whether I can take one off the plant and scoop out the seeds and use those seeds to immediately sow into a cell tray now for this year's crop. If that doesn't work, we do have backups that we scooped out from over summertime. So that's Onivec chili. Potatoes we can sow in February. All of our potatoes are home saved. This is a first early variety called Swift. And these were harvested, well, in summer, June maybe. And obviously we ate them, but we saved as many as we need for this year's planting. And so they've just been here in this Hessian sack, and you can see how they're starting to sprout. We're going to be looking to plant potatoes at the end of February, not at the start. So this is now the last week of January. So all we're going to do is rub off any growth, any sprouts that's shooting up now. And what's going to happen in the next 4 weeks is they're going to make new shoots, and they're called chits. And that helps the potatoes to, it gives them a little bit of a head start. So they're kind of all like that, really. But so they're your first early potatoes. Second early potatoes and main crop we don't plant until March. So, but first early potatoes, this is called Swift. But I think we also tried Rocket a couple of years ago with the same results. Okay, so the last one we're going to talk about today is peas. Peas are a cool weather crop. They're such a great crop to sow in February. You can sow them in January too. You can even sow them in December, I guess, but are you going to gain 2 months advantage by sowing in December as opposed to February? You're not really, and a February sowing, they're going to catch up. But from a February sowing of peas, you could be looking at transplanting these out end of March, at the start of spring, say, and you could be harvesting these as early as June. This is a variety called telephone pea, and peas are so easy to save your own seed from. You just let the pods turn from green to a brown, and then they go sort of papery. And then you just take the peas out and store them. We've stored these in a jar with some rice, uncooked rice, to sort of absorb any other moisture. And these are going to be ready for sowing very soon. We have already sown some overwintering peas, and we're actually in the middle of making a video on overwintering peas. They were sown in October. So they're currently in the greenhouse, and just like the broad beans, we've been taking them home backwards and forwards when it's been getting really cold. So they're currently in the greenhouse and they're looking pretty strong at the moment, actually. So we're going to be looking to plant those peas out at the end of this month, and they'll be giving us an earlier crop, let's say May, hopefully. That's a variety called Meteor. They make a small compact bush, not a really tall. These are called telephone pea. They grow up a trellis. They can grow 10 feet tall if you let them. So the Meteor overwintering peas we'll be looking to transplant out and harvest in May. These ones we can sow now-ish, first week of February, and look to get a harvest a month later than the Meteor peas, round about June time. So I think we're going to give a quick honourable mention to carrots. I know a lot of you sow carrots, and we've tried to sow carrots in January and February. If you sow them in a crate or a raised bed, give them a little bit of warmth, give them some cover, maybe a glass top, a cold frame or something like that. You can force them to come up. We've tried it for the last 2 or 3 years, and in our experience, maybe we're doing it wrong, but in our experience, the yield just isn't high enough to justify the effort and the seed sowing. So we ended up with tiny little carrots, maybe that sort of long. And that's great if you want some carrots in May time. But we already have sown carrots last July, and they're actually still in the ground in the greenhouse, and some in storage too. So we should have carrots going into April, May time. So I don't think we need to sow now for small carrots in May, but it's certainly an option, and it's something that I know some of you do, and I wish you best of luck with it. It didn't really work for us. So that is literally everything we sow in February. So much to be getting on with after a relatively quiet December and January. Well, what do you sow that we have missed out? Have we forgotten anything? Drop us a comment, let us know.